Hello everybody and welcome back to Newegg TV. I'm Steve and today I'm going to do an overview on this dual band wireless router from Linksys. That's model number WRT 1900AC. So we're going to start with a brief look at the front of the box. Of course, this is actually going to be considered the successor of the WRT 54GL that Linksys launched quite a while ago. I'm sure you guys remember. It's pretty much the same color scheme, but this thing is much beefier. So I wanted to add that there's quite a few things on this particular router, but we're going to kind of do a quick overview because I covered a lot of this with Michael from Linksys, so you can check out the interview. I'll mention that a little bit later with the link as well. So a couple things that are really big about this particular router. Obviously, it's a 1900AC router, which basically combines the 600 megabit per second on the N side, that's the 2.4 gigahertz side, as well as 1300 megabit per second throughput, maximum theoretical, of course, guys, on the 5 gigahertz side, giving you the full 1900 this particular router has. Quite a few things packed into a punch. It's also giving you, other than the fact it being dual band, also beamforming technology. There's a couple of USB 3 ports on here. I believe there might just be one, but I'll get to that in just a moment. 4 gigabit Ethernet ports as well. This does have a dual core 1.2 gigahertz CPU. Also 4 antennas, which is great because typically Linksys has the antennas on the inside. Should I be saying Belkin now? Well, I did want to say that actually because Belkin does own this, the Linksys engineers, if you liked Linksys technology, have been kept on board. So they're still working behind the Linksys name, just to kind of keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this to the side and show you guys a little bit of the information in terms of the specifications. So there is a total of 5 gigabit ports, one being the WAN. There is only one USB 3.0 port, but you're also getting one eSATA, aka or slash USB 2 port that is on the back. Then on top of that, we're also using the 4 antennas I mentioned. There's memory on board, 128 megabytes of flash and 256 megabytes of DDR3 memory. There's a couple LED lights. We'll look at that in just a moment. Here's your basic data rates, wireless encryption, and a storage file system support for FAT, NTFS, and HFS. But let me spin it around to the back here and show you a little bit more information about this particular router. The beamforming technology is probably one I want to kind of address the most. Basically, beamforming allows any router to that employs beamforming to better get a connection and conserve connection basically between two devices to give you a long distance to which you can actually communicate with your router, much longer than a typical router without beamforming. So it's fairly nice mojo that is used in order to be able to do that. But aside from that, there's something else pretty key in this particular router I wanted to mention too, that they're utilizing open source firmware, specifically OpenWRT. They actually developed it for use with OpenWRT. I should mention. Also, there's a smart Wi-Fi with network map that an app basically you'll be able to utilize a network map with. Depending on how much time we have today, I might be able to show you that, but more importantly, I actually want to show you what it looks like when you connect to this device. But first off, let's talk about what's inside the box. And they are providing for you the documentation on CD form, so if you do have an optical drive at the household, you'll be able to take a look at the documentation, unless of course you already have access to the internet with your cell phones or other mobile devices. You can actually look that up at Linksys' website. Moving along, we do have a quick start guide here that they do provide. It's fairly hard stock paper here, and I think that's mainly because you can put the information that you'd like to save, including the SSID for both your 2.4 gigahertz and your 5 gigahertz networks, as well as the passwords and the router password after you change it from the default. Definitely do that. Don't just plug this in and operate this router without changing the default password. Let me go ahead and open that up just to give you guys an idea. It's really straightforward on the installation. Literally, there's one step, screwing in the antennas and plug in the power. The second step is just plugging it directly into the cable modem itself. It's also warning you down here at the bottom, don't put things on top where the heat's actually able to escape from this device, because if you don't, it's just going to overheat. So, all right, so moving along, what else do we have here? We also have two parts of the AC adapter. One is the power cable itself plugging into the outlet. The other one is the actual AC adapter itself, providing power for the unit. And then we have one very thin Ethernet cable here, and you'll be able to plug that in order to give your cable modem connectivity to the router itself. But let's move right along into the router here, which is fairly beastly. It's very heavy, very large, I would say, in comparison to other routers typically, but they're packing a lot in here. As I mentioned before, it does have a 1.2 gigahertz dual-core ARM processor that's on board, providing all of the horsepower for this particular device. It's also a 3x3 setup, which breaks down to the 1900 megabit per second maximum theoretical throughput that I mentioned earlier. All 4 of these dual band detachable antennas are all over this thing, so trying to maximize your ability to communicate to your wireless devices, and they are adjustable, of course, too, which is fantastic. And being that they are SMA style, I can unscrew them here just to show you the SMA plug here. So you can actually replace that, pop in one of your own antennas that you purchase, maybe third party like Rosewill or something like that. Purchase anything you want, as long as it fits into the SMA style plug here. You'll be able to get maybe a directional antenna and get even more functionality out of it. But moving back to the front here, you can see the new Linksys logo right across the top and small kind of chrome-ish reflective metal there. And then if I come to the front, you can see all of the LEDs and where they'd be, each one starting on the left representing the power. Then we have internet connectivity or WAN connectivity, 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz transfers, eSATA connectivity, USB 1 or USB 2. I'm assuming these two are doubling over for either eSATA or USB 1. Then moving right along, we do have up to 4 different Ethernet connection activity lights that'll be here under 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then of course the WPS light here on the far right. So I'm just going to move this around to the back of the router, where we can get a look at all of the I/O. There we can see the WPS button here, as well as all 4 of the Giganet Ethernet ports for your LAN. Then we have the WAN Gigabit Ethernet port, as well as a USB 2, and that is USB 3.0, as well as USB 1, which is 2.0, which also doubles as the eSATA port here. Then, of course, we have the reset button in order to reset this particular router back to its default settings. The AC power plug connector goes in here, and a nifty little power switch, so that this way you could actually shut it off should you need to manually, as opposed to unplugging the power cable and plugging it back in again. There's a bit more information here on the very bottom of this router. And you can see there's obviously tons of porous area here for heat to be able to leave the chassis itself. Up here on the top we have the serial number, then we have the MAC address. That's going to be important in case you set up something specific for this router to have a specific IP address or any kind of specialized setup on your network. Also the default Linksys wireless wireless network information, I should say, as well as the wireless password information. So we've gotten connected to the network via this router now. I've connected the system that you're viewing this capture on, and I've gone straight to actually any website, because if you use the standard DNS settings for DHCP, then it's going to use the router as the DNS server, which in this particular case is 192.168.6.1, but that is just in case you guys didn't already know this. It basically just forces you to go straight to the Wi-Fi setup. But if you ended up using your own personal DNS settings, then that's going to be different, so just keep that in mind. Otherwise you have to go to 192.168.6.1. All right, so we're going to go ahead and skip right over to the actual Wi-Fi setup. I'm going to go straight into manually configuring this, just because I want to show you guys what it looks like in the GUI. So give this a moment here while it gets set up. All right, now the next step is to sign in to your Linksys Smart Wi-Fi sign-in. So I've done so. I'm going to sign in right now. And now finally, it's asking me to set up the password for the router. So let me first type in the default one. I should say it's asking for the default password, excuse me guys, which is admin in this particular case. Now here we are logged in to the actual home page here that's going to show us all the basic information about the router. This device is clearly connected to the internet. We can turn on our guest network from here. We can check out the network map. If there was anything wireless connected to it, it would show here, which it currently does not. Set up our media prioritization and the like. I can see here I can edit the name. So let's say you have multiple Linksys devices in your with your login, associated to your login, then you'd be able to edit this name and set up a specific name like Jimmy's Room or something like that. Go moving right along to the network map. As you can see, there's only one particular system that's currently connected to it. We can also check out the internet usage. Moving right along, here's guest access. Now I'm basically at this point just going to fly through everything without explaining anything, just so that you guys can see exactly what this router looks like on the GUI, and you can form your own opinions, including being able to speed test it, which I vaguely remember doing for you guys in the past with another Linksys router that I did an overview on. Moving right along, of course, we have connectivity as well. We can check it to automatically check for updates as well, which is obviously really great if you want to have just hands-off administration. Some other internet settings in terms of IPv4 and IPv6. Local network, everything about the local net in terms of the LAN side that you're going to want to set up. Advanced routing here, I kind of flipped by that really quickly. If you want to check out or set up your local management access to have HTTPS instead of just HTTP, that's probably not a bad idea. Then of course we can look at troubleshooting, check out the wireless settings here, and they have MAC filtering, so you can set it up to only allow or specifically deny MAC addresses that get access to this router. And finally on to security, where we can look at the IPv4 SPI as well as IPv6 SPI firewalls. You can use these 4 different internet filters and set up a VPN pass-through as well. Set up your DMZ if you want to have something with no protection whatsoever. Set up DDNS and select from, looks like 2 different providers, DYDNS and TZO.com. You can set up your port forwarding, both for single port and ranges, as well as triggering. And finally, on to the application. This is the Linksys Smart Wi-Fi application. This is the iOS version. I believe there's an Android version as well. It starts out here at the App Center, and it shows you the device that I'm currently connected to, which is, of course, the one that I just showed you earlier. Moving right along, we have guest access, and there's other things we can actually administer from the application as well, but it starts with guest access. Moving along to parental controls, then to media prioritization, external storage, the devices that are currently connected to this particular router, and if I click this little down arrow here, we also have more information. That is the Wi-Fi tools that I mentioned before in list format, as well as some additional options. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this overview of Linksys' new router, the WRT 1900AC. Don't forget, if you like this video, to click the like button. We also actually did an interview with Michael from Linksys. I forgot to mention that during the video. You guys go ahead and check that out. We'll have that in the link in the description in below. But until then, we will see you guys very soon.